I'm Tracy Austin, your host of the People Strategy Podcast. This show provides interviews with organizational leaders and ongoing coaching experiences that highlight elevating people in organizations through a people strategy roadmap.
When you're more into leadership and you're painting with the colors, you have an idea of what you want to do, and you're kind of saying, hey, come follow me. I have this great idea, this path that we need to go on. We need to figure it out.
Welcome to the People Strategy Podcast. Today, we have the start of an incredibly special series where we are talking about leadership development for the next 8 weeks. And we have a favorite podcast guest that will be, we don't know if we're co-hosting or what we're doing here. So Adam Gruszcynski has joined me from Potawatomi Casino Hotel, and we're going to go through a little bit of leadership development. And Adam is the IT director at Potawatomi and has taken many of the items that we've talked about in our podcast and in our courses into day-to-day reality. So Adam, welcome.
Thanks, Tracy. Glad to be here, and I appreciate you inviting me here to talk about leadership on the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always fun when we go back and look at our podcasts and see some of the highest rated ones and most listened ones. And Adam's was absolutely one of those. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge. If you haven't liked, followed 5-Starter Podcast yet, please do that. And if you're looking for an IT job and you haven't applied yet at Potawatomi with Adam, do that too. All right, there's my shameless plugs for today. So let's talk a little bit about leadership and kind of what leadership is. And Adam, I'm curious, when you look at, leadership inside of an organization and that distinction between a manager and a leader, what is that?
I think it's pretty straightforward. At least knowing what I know now, it's straightforward. I think it's black and white and colorful. I think being a manager, you fall in that black and white area. And when you're a leader or in a leadership position, you got the whole color spectrum at your disposal. What I mean by that is when you're a manager, you're assigned a task, you need to get something done, and you have people who report to you who get that thing done. And now that can be, they have to figure it out on their own, or they're following a pre-planned formula that has worked in the past that they just need to repeat. And you kind of just keep that process going to get everything done that the organization needs. When you're more into leadership and you're painting with the colors, you have an idea of what you want to do, and you're kind of saying, hey, come follow me. I have this great idea, this path that we need to go on. We need to figure it out. We know what the end destination is, but the journey to get there is what's going to be the fun, exciting portion of it. We're going to figure it out together, and we're going to, have this journey, and I'm going to help inspire you to see my vision that I've created, or the end goal that did not exist or has changed significantly. And they use all those different colors of inspiring and focusing and leading people to achieve that goal.
I love that of colors with leadership. And what's so interesting is when we're bringing folks through our leadership development program, one of those key things is leadership is really embodied. It's a true caring about the person and their growth, along with meeting those outcomes or those tasks, right? Management tends to be much more about like the cog in the wheel of the task, whereas leadership's much more about how do I lead you for you to reach your full potential, which means we're reaching the full potential within the job.
100%. And I think that falls in that color analogy that, one of the tools a leader has is the personal growth of the people working with them on this journey, get them to step outside of their comfort zone, or have them do things that they don't believe that they can do or think they should be doing, and get them to grow personally and professionally along this journey to accomplish the goal. And that is one of the, I think, predominant features of a leader, is getting people to be able to do that. And then next time when it comes around, it's like, yep, you got me to do it once, I'm on board for the second time, let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's been coming up a lot lately is this distinction between a transactional leader and a transformational leader. And, like when we look at a transformational leader, I love to describe this as an individual that sees others bigger than they see themselves. And I actually just had this conversation with with the HR Like a Boss podcast of like, how do we see people bigger than they see themselves? So I'm curious, Adam, how have you been a transformational leader with some of your folks that you've grown through the IT department?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did listen to that podcast of HR Like a Boss, and that is such a great title that I want to try to steal, IT like a boss and somehow incorporate that into my day-to-day life.
Oh, John will love it, by the way.
So stay tuned to see how that goes. Transformational leadership ties into just being a great leader because you're using the tools of, having a vision, inspiring, getting people to think creatively outside of their comfort zone or outside their box to achieve that goal of whatever it may be. And in doing that, there's often personal growth that is the result of this transformational change. And that is a key component to that, because on the flip side, you have more transactional leadership, which is if you do this, you will get this. Like if you complete these goals within the year, you might get a bonus at the end of the year, or if you're really good at doing something, hey, thanks for working a couple extra shifts, take this time off. That's really kind of the difference, I think, and feel between a transactional versus a transformational leadership. And here in the IT department, I'm only the second IT director that's ever worked here. The first one was here since the inception of the organization and was here for 30 plus years before she decided to retire. And while I enjoyed working for her and learned things from her, she was kind of set in her ways. She did kind of the same thing for as long as I've been here, which is going on over 16 years. And it kind of led for, if I was ever, maybe in charge, I might do some things differently and make some changes to the organization and the department. And, one of the biggest things that an IT department has is their help desk. They are the first call when something breaks, when something doesn't go right, when you need something from a computer, a software, a hardware, a printing perspective, they get that first phone call. And there was some, I'll say, fine tuning that could present itself to make the help desk run smoother. And part of that was, realigning the help desk and the way they thought and who was in charge of the help desk. And when I was looking for someone new to lead the team, I had this vision, and so did my CIO. We shared the same vision of what we wanted the help desk to be, and finding the right person who saw our vision and said, hey, I see what you're going for. I think I can help you implement it and achieve what you're looking for. And these are the things I want to do to achieve that. What do you think? And ultimately, there was a person who said, who presented in that way and met all the things we were looking to do. And we promoted her, and she's now running our help desk. So it's getting people to believe in, what you're trying to do, and getting them sometimes to step outside of their comfort zone to do that and have success in doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about that story that you just gave within the transformational leadership is you tied it back to vision and transformational leaders. And, one of the things we're really looking at within our leadership development program is what's the mission, vision, values of the organization, and how are those embedded in the day-to-day work and behaviors, but also tied into that vision. Because then what we're doing is we're like taking the whole person, the being of the whole person and how they're leading, into getting much more creative and impactful solutions to problems that move it forward, because we're not tied to the how it's done. We're tied to the outcome that it's producing in a way that allows folks to step into who they really are. And because we all think differently, right? Like all of our brains are different, and we each have different passions and things that we're impacted by and about. So that transformational leadership really creates the transformation of an individual and their growth along with the organization. And when you tie back to the mission, vision, values, and of that, it ties it all together.
Yeah. And I when you mentioned tying into the organization's mission, vision, and values, one thing I did here that I felt worked really well for me, and I want to share with you because I think it can work well for others who are listening to this podcast, is yes, most organizations have an organizational mission, vision, and values. And then some organizations take it a step further, and some departments within the organization have their own mission, vision, and values that then tie into the organizational mission, vision, and values. When I became manager of the cybersecurity team here, one of the things I worked with my team doing is creating the team's mission, vision, and values that would lead then to the goals of the IT department and the organization. And I thought we came up with a good slogan, and ended up having a poster made of it and plastered it on the wall so that every day when everyone walked into their desks, our mission, vision, and values was right there for everyone to see, not only on our team, but all the other teams that made up the IT department. And I feel like when you see that every day, it just doesn't become a thing that is created and then pushed to the side and dusted off every 5 to 10 years when it needs to be refreshed. If you're constantly seeing it, it's a lot easier to live it and do it. And that worked well here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had a couple of guests on really talking about mission, vision, and values within that. One of them was very specifically about if it is not, if it's on the wall, it's lived in the hall. And that was, I'm trying to remember which podcast that was. But it's one of those that, how do we ensure that what we're doing truly is lived out through the entire organization versus just lip service? Because nobody wants lip service, right? Like, that's not transformational leadership. It's when we take the words and we embed them in the actions of what's specifically happening in those day-to-day behaviors.
And I think, talking about how to, be a leader, if you're new to, being management and you want to be a leader, one of the things you've talked about a lot on your podcast is culture. And one of my big takeaways from culture, I don't remember what podcast, but I know you had the conversation with guests and you've said it, many, many times over and over, is culture is what happens in the hallways when you're not there. And that, breeds hand in hand with mission, vision, and values. When it's on the wall and what is happening when you're not in the room is really the culture of your team, your department, your organization. And that is all really set from the leadership standpoint of what do you want to have happen, because you can't be everywhere 24/7, 365. It's impossible. So you have to work with your team and your departments to establish this is what we're doing now, get on or get out of the way type of thing.
For sure. For sure. And when we kind of talk about that too, one of the things that we really see with new leaders is a fear of having some of those critical conversations and having those accountability conversations. And, but that's a part of ensuring that we have the culture that we want, is when we see behaviors or we hear about behaviors that don't align with the culture and what is okay in our organization, that we're bringing it up. And it doesn't mean it's disciplinary, and it doesn't mean that it's a slap on the hand necessarily. But sometimes, and most of the time, especially the first time things happen, it is truly something that an individual thinks is okay, a way of doing it. And when we start to have transparency in our conversations and bring things forward and just kind of say, hey, I noticed that this happened last week, or, I noticed some mannerisms in a conversation or some things that were said, and I'm curious, what was going on for you? Now we can start here. When we approach things through curiosity, we can understand where they're coming from, and then we can start to course correct around, what do you think the impact of that was potentially on the team around us at that time? I don't know. So now we're bringing awareness, self-awareness to them around the impacts or ripples of the behavior, and then aligning it back to a core value. Now we're pulling all the things together, and those don't have to be scary conversations, which so often with new leaders, we see a huge fear of.
You're right. No one likes having those conversations where it's, hey, you're doing something wrong. We need to talk about this. A lot of time those conversations can be simply framed as, a learning opportunity, or, this is the way we've always done things. I'm in a new position of leadership. That's not going to fly anymore. Explaining the situation and the why behind it. A lot of times, if people know the why, much more likely to jump on board and be receptive of what the change is. Or it could be a conversation around empowerment. Like, an example here, a lot of times with old management, I don't want to call it micromanaging, but some could call it that, is that a lot of changes had to go all the way through the IT director. And I'm like, I don't have time, nor do I want to be involved in all this stuff. You guys are running the teams. You are responsible for the systems or these areas. I trust you to know what is best for our guests and our business partners. I'm empowering you to make the right decision. And if for some odd reason the decision isn't right and it makes its way back to me, we'll talk about what happened and what we can do to improve the situation. But it's just framing it like you have the power. Let's talk about you having the power and what happens if something wrong happens, but go ahead, do you. That's why you're here, to do the thing, to make this organization a great experience for everybody that steps foot inside the building. And that was a conversation that had to be had with many teams and many people. And it wasn't just a one and done conversation with some people. It was, a daily, weekly, monthly conversation until it was finally that old way of thinking finally got pushed out of their brain to the new way of thinking. It just, some conversations also take multiple attempts and multiple times to make a change occur.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's kind of this idea is mistakes as launch pads, right? Like, let me ask you a question, Adam, and I really want our listeners to answer this question as well, is where did you learn the most? Did you learn the most when you nailed something, or did you learn the most when you made a mistake?
Definitely making mistakes you learn more from. And I would argue, at least from an IT perspective, I learned the most when we were putting out fires. Like when that thing blew up at 2:00 in the morning and the gaming floor was down and you got to get that thing up as fast as you possibly can. It's not something you normally done. Well, guess what? You're learning very quickly about how to get it up and what caused the problem. And you can deal with stuff after the fact, but getting it back up, because that's our main source of revenue, you learn very quickly. And not everyone gets put into fires, but everyone makes a mistake. We're all human. It happens. Those are the times where you got to, take a step back, reflect what caused the mistake, what can you learn from it, and how do I improve and be better next time?
Yeah. And so for our, new leaders out there, for our leaders managing and mentoring new leaders, I think one of those key items is how do we support them to build and gain confidence in themselves? And, I think a key piece of that is something you just named, Adam, and that is having grace with yourself when those mistakes happen, but also being willing to take enough risk to make the mistake, because that's where the innovation and the creativity is also going to come in. What else do you have for that?
Yeah, I definitely stepping outside of your comfort zone. I mean, that's the only way you're really going to learn. There was a lot of things I thought I could do the director job rather well, but
all right, I want to hear about
it. Knowing there was a lot of things that I never got exposed to, like budgeting and billing and all of that stuff. Well, yes, I'm aware that's part of the job. I think I can do it well. Never actually done it. Don't know until you actually have to do it. One of the things I would encourage new leaders to do is find somebody, whether you want to call them a coach or a mentor, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, but establishing someone that you can go to who's been through it, who's done it, who has knowledge on the situation that you can reference, is an invaluable source for a new leader. You're not alone. Other people have done it, have been through it, have probably screwed up worse than you're going to screw up. Find those people, make those connections, and work with them to help you build your confidence in your own skills and your own ability. The other thing I would add to that is just do. If you don't do it, how are you going to learn? How are you going to know all right, I did it. I made it through. I can definitely improve, but you don't know where you can improve upon until you actually do the thing. And as you do the thing, that confidence slowly builds and builds and builds. Like with budgeting and managing a budget, all right, I think I can do it. I spend a little, I carved out an hour every day to kind of work on it. And then I came up with this plan that I, sat down, with my CIO and said, here, this is where I think we are for the upcoming fiscal year. What do you think? And then we sat down and digested it, and he had questions and I was able to explain it. And that, just having that conversation after all the work I put in was another learning opportunity for me to see all right, somebody who's been doing this for a while, what does he think about what I've done so far and how can I improve upon? So for next year, or maybe finalizing the budget, it is what it needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we do talk about in the leadership development program is how do we set our team up to truly learn? And, there's a number of case studies out there, but this 70, 2010, I love, 70% of the learning happens on the job by doing. 20% happens in collaboration with a mentor like your CIO, and 10% happens in your formalized classes, right? So like when we're working with our new leaders in our leadership development program, like that's that 10% is what's happening in the training sessions and in the coaching sessions that week. The 20% is that collaboration that they have with their leader. And we do a pre-assessment, a halfway through assessment, and an assessment at the end from both the leader and the new leader that's in the program. So their supervisor and the new leader that's in the program to really look at, hey, where's the growth happening? Where do they want to see that growth happening? But that 20% of the collaboration together of, you did the budget, 70%, you're working with your CIO, the 20% to look at what that is. And you may have taken a budgeting class, right? And that together really sets folks up to be successful in a new job. And as we look at leadership, it is also asking the questions so folks can give their opinions on it versus giving the answers of how they should do it. Like you said, I don't want everything to run through me. I want them to make the decisions at the level that they're at.
Correct. Yeah. And the other thing I would add about that, the 20% of finding someone to work with, it doesn't have to be somebody in your organization. I mean, there are a lot of associations and groups outside of your organization, whether they're local to the area you live in or nationally, where leadership, mentoring, pairing does occur. So that it is out there. And I recommend people looking into that who are new to leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So next week, we will be talking about coaching. But as we kind of wrap up today's conversation on what is leadership, what is this kind of distinction between leadership and management? One of those key things with a leader is really looking at, hey, how does a leader gain trust to, have that influence with their team to hit what those business results are?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I've found that have gone into building trust with the people who are in charge of the various teams that report to me. Establishing one-on-ones where you have dedicated time, where you're having conversations with that person. And I think there's two ways one-on-ones can work, where I'm driving the conversation and the things I want to see done with the person, and then flipping it and giving the person, the keys to drive. And what do you want to talk about? What are your roadblocks that you need me to help you with? What are things you're looking on, working on, thinking about, and letting them drive and steer the conversation? And then you as the leader kind of just being the sounding board, hearing what they're saying, like truly hearing what they're saying, and then, acting upon what you hear. Another thing is, if you do have to have a conversation with somebody about, something that didn't go well or performance issues, praise publicly, reprimand quietly. Always never do it in public. Always do it where it's a one-on-one situation and it's just you and the person that you need to talk to about curbing the behavior. Having those conversations with others around does not do well for morale for the team or the person who needs to show the improvement. That's a big one that I can speak from personal experience that happened to me once many moons ago in a different organization where I made a mistake. And everyone in the department knew about it, and I was being talked to in front of everybody about how dumb the mistake I made was and how I couldn't believe the mistake was being made. And that was one of those things that, yep, I sat there and I took it. But in my head, I'm like, the takeaway from this for me is A, don't make that mistake. But B, if I'm ever in a position to lead, I know how this feels and I don't want anyone else to feel that way. So if I'm going to be a leader, I will never do this given, that playing field. I will always do it privately because I experienced it in a public setting and it wasn't very pleasurable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, within that is, we're going to have the one-on-one conversations. there, but also the transparency of, what are our wins this week as a whole? And what did we learn this week as a whole? So we don't have the same mistakes being made by every single person on the team. But there's a difference between saying that was the stupidest mistake ever, and I cannot believe Adam did that, and hey, here's some things that we all can learn as a team to move it forward. I think that there's a huge distinction there.
Sure. I also think another way to have success in new leadership is giving people easy wins early. If you establish, something needed to be done or a goal to be met that's not overly complicated or overly thought-provoking, that it's just, it's easy, but maybe the person who's going to be responsible for it is hemming and hawing, working with them and gently guiding them to that easy victory so that they're like, hey, I crossed this finish line. It wasn't that bad. It was probably all in my head. Let's go. What else do you have for me? And then as you keep on doing that, you make that end thing a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult. And those big projects, those big challenges don't seem that intimidating once you get to them, because you've built that confidence and they're just kind of moving up the ladder of believing in themselves.
Yeah, that addicted to success, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And really, yeah, for sure, that addicted to success, so that we've got the wins that are happening and everything is laddering, right? And when we ladder, is that ladder going to be steps that are small enough that we can step up, or do we have these huge rungs that there's no way we're going to reach it, and then we set an individual up to fail?
Yep, absolutely.
Amazing. And so as we close out today, I'm curious, Adam, what are 2 or 3 things that were your biggest takeaways from our conversation today?
For new leaders, there are going to be moments of doubt if you can actually cut the mustard. Don't worry about it. Everyone has them, just do. And you'll find in that doing, you're actually able to do it, and you're making it a bigger deal in your own head than it actually is. Most people that I've found when I've said, oh, I didn't think I could do it, are like, really? We knew you could. You needed to believe in yourself. And that is very common. Don't worry about it. It happens to all of us. I can speak. It has happened to me. And then just really establishing early on with the people that report to you, what you're expecting and how you can set them up for easy wins to gain that confidence that, the relationship we're going to have going forward is something that is going to be beneficial to both. Everyone's going to enjoy it, and establishing a path to victory early so that you can nail everything out of the park going forward.
Amazing. I absolutely love that. It's like the imposter syndrome, right? We all have imposter syndrome. So how do we overcome it? We overcome it just by doing and, getting some of that feedback. And again, we don't walk into something confident. We gain confidence by having competence in it by doing it first. So love our conversation. Please, come back and join us next week as we talk about coaching. And again, this podcast is brought to you by the Leadership Development Program put on by Elevated Talent Consulting. And we will see you next week.
See you next week. Take care. Be good.
Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Tracy, TRACI Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.